Hello and welcome to my channel. This is the historical Larkspur billboard from my village, and it dates back to a time when we used to manufacture our own pop, which was also from this very same building. And this is how the sign looked for many years, until 2014 when it was restored back to its original state. Since this is a historical landmark, I decided to make a diorama out of it, and I'm going to depict a scene from the early 1970s when the billboard was first painted. So I've already taken my measurement and worked out which scale I'm going to use, and it's going to be 1:35. So then I transferred all those measurements onto a sheet of PVC board. This also includes working out the approximate size of each stone. Yes, and those all need marking up too. Thankfully though, it's the typical overlapping pattern. So I'm pretty much making just the billboard and the immediate surroundings, otherwise this diorama will be huge, as it's set on a crossroads with wide empty spaces. So I cut it out, and now I have my first template. Even though I'm not recreating the entire building, I do need to add a little bit of depth to it. So I created these two side pieces and bricked them up. Then using the hobby knife, I cut around each and every brick. These are only shallow cuts, mind you, as I went on to use a pointed file to widen the gaps. And now those are starting to look more like bricks. There's no texture yet, although there's another way of adding that. And that's by rolling up a ball of tin foil and pushing it in. I'm not sure how well you can see it, but there's a mottly pattern everywhere. Next, I measure and cut out the base, and this will be the pavement, and this is the rough positioning of the wall. There will also be a little bit of a road added later on. I marked on the curb edges, but I can't finish them off until I've done the drop curb. So for that we'll have to sand it down. This doesn't need to be level with the road, but it's got to be somewhere near. And while I'm at it, I need to erode the side of the wall which people come in contact with. Then I drill a hole in the pavement so that I can insert a traffic light. If my memory serves me correctly, back in those days you'll have one set of traffic lights per direction, so that's 4 across roads. One of my pet peeves in life are googly eyes, but they do have their uses, such as creating traffic lights. Using the same tubing as I used for the pole, I cut out and sanded down each of the shades, and then I superglued those into place. Then it's just a matter of mounting all the parts onto a pole and filling in the gaps. And then you'll have a traffic light design from the 70s. Next, I need to make up the frame for the advert. This is going to be slightly raised. I'm going to assemble it first before attaching it to the wall, and that way I can ensure that it's perfectly flat. I've also given it a sanding pass so you can't see the joins. Next, I added on this raised bar at the top, plus I've also glued all the wall parts together. They just need sanding down and blending together like they're just one wall. Then I added these sticky out bits at the top. I think this is some sort of roof support. Speaking of roof support, I create a frame for mine. I've done this in such a way that it clips on and off, which makes it easier for painting. Next, I add on the base layer and the corner pieces. Then I've got a few dozen little tiles to stick on. I need to make sure I overlap these to replicate the real thing. And a few hours later, I have a roof. And with it put into place, that's the basic diorama finished. Although at the moment it's little more than a blank canvas. I'm going to worry about how I populate it later, but for now I'm going to prime everything, and I'm doing this with a brush rather than spray on primer. This makes it easier to get into every nook and crevice, but unfortunately it also means I have to apply 2 or 3 coats. I'm going to start by painting the base, and I'm going to work my way up. The road surface is black, the pavement is very dark grey, and the curb is a medium grey. You may notice that I'm dabbing on rather than brushing, and this creates texture and gets rid of brush strokes. The colour has come out a little bit darker than what I expected, but that's okay as I'll be using a couple of different methods to lighten them up. And the first involves dry brushing on a light grey, and this helps to create a natural variant. There's a single yellow line which goes around the outside of this curb. The neatest way to recreate this is by masking it off. Because I'm going to be using a yellow, I first need to put down a layer of white, otherwise the yellow will come across as dull and need several coats. Once that's all dried, I can remove the masking tape. I ended up doing some very minor touch-up work, but this method is still the most accurate way of doing it. If you freehand it, you'll be spending a long time touching up. Now I'm going to apply some grey weathering powder and lighten up the tarmac a little bit more. There will also be a build-up of grime, between the curb and the road. I used a mixture of earthly colours for this. Now moving on to the wall, I painted the stone a buff yellow. I then used a slightly darker mixture and selected some individual bricks, because if you look closely on these old walls, they're not all the same consistency. I now tried some dirt, and for this I gave it a dark wash. Most of the dirty areas are higher up, because pedestrians can't reach that high to wear and tear it. Any area where I've gone too heavy, I simply dab off with a tissue. And now for the scary part. I'm going to mix some proper filler along with some buff paint. By the way, I did seal the bricks first with a matte sealer, so it's just a matter of throwing this stuff down and ensuring it gets in all the crevices. I then dragged it over a scraper to ensure an even coverage. And once it's mostly dry, I wipe it over with a wet sponge until the wall starts to look clean. I took a photo of the sign and cleaned it up in Photoshop. Then a friend kindly printed out on stickers for me, and now it's just a matter of lining it all up. This single piece alone brings it all to life. I used a steel ruler to ensure all the edges are stuck down, and any bubbles that form can be pushed out with my finger. And I'm not talking about the billion bubbles in the artwork. Right, it's time to work on the roof. And to start off, paint all the slate grey. The bit underneath is in black. I can't tell on the photo whether this is supposed to be some kind of felt or guttering. Next, I cover everything with a black wash. Then I wipe some of it off with a tissue, leaving enough residue in all the cracks, crevices and across the edges, as these are the areas where stagnant water will pool. The roof is dotted with yellow and green stains. This is either being caused by falling vegetation or whatever's been growing on the roof itself. Next I dry brush on some white, and this brings out the highlights on the edges. These old traffic lights have black and white stripes on them, so the easiest way to paint these is by masking them off, and that way you can just slap on the paint any old way. It is nice to take the stress out of being accurate. Thankfully, after a little while, this little stress on the plastic parts starts to look like the real thing. The nerve-wracking part is taking off the tape, and then everything can be glued into place. And it's looking very much like the real location, except maybe a little cleaner, a little younger. So I'm going to add some dirt, leaves and stones across the edges, and these are the areas where the road sweepers struggle to get to. And you can see that it adds another layer of realism to the diorama. So I'm going to put this to one side for now and start to work on populating it. These guys are going to paint the actual sign, and I'm going to have a couple of these kids casually drinking some pop. And this net set will provide the bottles, and I'll also need some pigeons for the roof, as well as a stray dog, which were more common back then. All these kits are from different manufacturers, but they're all the same scale, so hopefully they'll all blend in together. For the paintworkers set, each item comes on its own sprue. So you've got the buckets, the large step ladder, the small step ladder, painter number 1 and painter number 2. I used a pair of snips to remove each part from the sprue. Some of these parts are very thin because of the scale, so I have to take extra care. And if you see any little white tabs, they need filing down. And my choice of glue is model cement, as it basically weld both halves together. Right, I'm going to get these finished off camera and show you the finished models. And these guys are looking pretty good, although the kit does not come with handles for the buckets. So I'm going to make my own by melting this thin piece of styrene, and to get the curve I wrap it around a small cylinder, and once it's cooled down I can trim it to the size I need, and that indeed makes a huge difference. I'm going to get all the other models built up off camera, then I'm going to start painting them. I've already painted the accessories, ladders, buckets, etc. So now I've got 4 people to paint, and I start off by priming them. Then I give them all a slightly different flesh tone, followed by a flesh wash, because after all, variety is the spice of life. It's important to remember that we're in a 1970s setting, so clothing will be fairly basic compared to today's standards. Even during my time in the 80s, all trainers were white. You had no other colour varieties. So I made sure I painted the boys' footwear accordingly, and the same goes for the white socks. Everything else was similar to the box art. This boy was supposed to be playing a trumpet, but I was swapping it out for a bottle of pop. So with all the figures completed, it's time to glue them into place. We did seem to have a lot of random dogs walking about back then, so I'm representing that. And no roof is complete without a bunch of pigeons. Now I need some young lads chilling on the street corner, drinking some pop. He sat down reading a book, so I placed his bottle on the ground next to him, and it's here you can see just how tiny these items are. I also give him a friend, and because of his pose, I managed to find a wooden box for him to sit on, and this we can also assume comes from the factory, which is also in the building behind them. Next, I add in the painter. His brush is also painted red to match the sign. He also has a colleague who got a shorter pair of steps and a yellow tin of paint. He stands further back, admiring his handiwork. Before the reveal, let's have a look at what the place looks like today. Bearing in mind the sign has been restored, it's also more cluttered with 2 traffic lights, railings and some other bits and pieces. But we can go about 50 years when things were much simpler. And I certainly hope it does carry a nostalgic feel to those who know the area. Ironically, it's at this set of crossroads where the famous cat's eyes were first used, and it was part of the battlefield during the English Civil War when the area was known as Aborton Moor. So this little area has seen a lot of history and had a lot of changes, and it's nice just to capture one little piece of it and preserve it. Thank you for watching. Don't forget, if I can do it, so can you.